It wasn't the outcome that stunned them. It was the way you made it look like fate itself had been rewritten in real time. They were prepared for opposition, expecting protest, assuming effort. What they weren't ready for was a move so quiet, so unapologetically seamless. It felt like you had found a secret back door in the programming of existence. You didn't sprint past them. You slipped past, like gravity had bent just for you. That's what rattles them. They watched you rearrange the structure they swore was absolute. And you did it without raising your voice, without flinching, without breaking a single sweat-stained rule. That's why they're whispering now. You didn't win the game. You replaced it. And they're still holding the old controller, wondering why nothing's responding anymore. You didn't just succeed. You succeeded in a way that made everyone else's path feel bloated, obsolete, unnecessary. And now the room is in disarray. Not because you climbed a higher peak, but because you proved the mountain was never real. They spent years mastering what they were told to master. You spent silence mastering yourself. That's the cheat code. No one gave them identity. While they accumulated advice, shortcuts, endorsements, you were trimming excess like a sculptor, removing every layer of performance until you became exactly what the moment demanded. No extra noise, no filler, just execution. Refined to such simplicity, it looked supernatural. They call it a hack because the truth is too humiliating. You did what they didn't believe was possible, and you made it look inevitable. People crave explanations when things defy their frameworks. They'd rather accuse you of cheating than admit they've been playing by rules meant to keep them average. Your grace under pressure must be manipulation. Your composure during betrayal must be detachment. Your precision must be pre-planned. They never consider that you were simply present. You were awake in moments where they were asleep at the wheel. You were watching the floor shift while they stared at the ceiling, praying for meaning. And when the moment came, you moved. Not louder, not faster, just exactly right. That's why they say you bent reality, because deep down, they know you didn't break anything. You just noticed the cracks they ignored. Psychologically, it's called cognitive dissonance. The mental discomfort experienced when someone witnesses a result that contradicts everything they've been taught to believe. You became a walking contradiction. You stood as evidence that their belief in complexity was a shield for their cowardice. You didn't talk about strategy, you embodied clarity. That's what truly threatened them. It wasn't the win. It was the way you won. Quiet, sudden, with no applause, with no approval. You didn't even look at them when you passed them. That's what left the scar. You didn't mock. You didn't react. You moved. And they're still spinning. You want to know why people say you hacked reality? It's because you removed the part where they thought suffering was required for respect. They believe legitimacy comes through pain, hierarchy, steps. You showed up and did in one action what they've been trying to do with a lifetime of effort. That's why they're scrambling now. Rewriting narratives, rebuilding illusions. You didn't ask permission. You didn't signal your power. You embodied it. And people trained to bow to process can't accept raw authority that answers to no one. They've been taught to fear chaos, and you made chaos look like home. They hate that you never asked for their recognition. Hate that your silence wasn't insecurity, but strategy. While they networked, you studied. While they performed, you disappeared. You were unaccounted for on their spreadsheets, unmeasurable in their gossip, untagged in their schemes. But when the pressure came, they folded. And you didn't even blink. That's what makes them call it a hack. Because real strength doesn't announce itself. It watches, it waits, and when the illusion cracks, it steps in. Not to be noticed, but to replace the lie with something permanent. They thought you were gone. They thought you had no moves left. What they didn't realize is that your silence was construction. Your withdrawal was design. You were building something bigger than their minds could process. A version of yourself that didn't flinch at games anymore. And when that version emerged, it wasn't emotional, it wasn't loud, it was clean, surgical. 6 seconds, one pivot, one email. One door walked through that none of them even noticed until it was too late. And now, you don't even need to defend your position, because their confusion is your billboard. Every move you make now is watched. They study your posture. They echo your tone. They mimic your steps without understanding your motive. But it doesn't matter, because by the time they realize you're not using the map, they're still asking for directions. That's the psychological burn they can't heal from. You're living proof that reinvention doesn't need validation. That mastery doesn't require a label. That power, when properly internalized, makes the system irrelevant. You didn't just break through. You redefined the metrics. And now they're playing in a world shaped by your restraint. You didn't cheat. You outgrew the system. And they're still locked inside it, running simulations that never imagined you. That's what shakes them. You moved through chaos without absorbing it. You adapted without announcement. You turned quiet into a weapon and presence into a verdict. You didn't pull off a trick. You became the anomaly. And anomalies don't ask for understanding. They walk past the burning stage and leave everyone wondering how the fire started in the first place. They didn't clap, so you assumed you hadn't transformed. That's how the system trained you, to equate applause with progress. But what they never told you was this: the real metamorphosis happens in silence, without ceremony, without spotlight. Reinvention is not a show. It is a crime scene. The old you is murdered, buried without flowers. And the new you rises in a world that hasn't caught up yet. That delay, their inability to recognize what you've become, is not proof you failed. It's proof you succeeded without their permission, because true reinvention doesn't wait for consensus. It moves, it mutates, it makes eye contact with your past, and doesn't flinch. They're confused by your quiet. The same mouth that once explained, justified, softening now stays still, and they mistake that stillness for emptiness. But you know better. Stillness is strategy. You stopped seeking nods. You stopped needing their reactions to breathe life into your evolution. That's what scared them the most, the realization that your growth no longer ran through their judgment. You outgrew their currency. They deal in gossip. You now deal in results. They trade in attention. You operate in impact. And when you made that pivot, their power over your identity collapsed like a sandcastle under high tide. There comes a moment when you stop needing to prove the new you exists and start realizing that proving it is beneath you. That's the shift. That's when you graduate from survival to sovereignty. You no longer chase closure from people who are only ever witnesses, never architects. They never built you. So why should their disbelief delay you? Reinvention is not a request. It's a verdict, one you deliver in your walk. Your absence, your refusal to engage in their outdated narrative. They still speak about who you were. You've already become who you were meant to be. That disconnect, that silence, that's your trophy. They call it delusion. They always do, at first. When someone reinvents themselves without permission, without audience, without apology, it looks like rebellion. And to them, it is. Because they weren't invited. They weren't consulted. You didn't write a press release for your resurrection. You didn't warn the room that you were about to become untouchable. You just did it. Quietly. While they were laughing, while they were labeling you, you were recalibrating. They assumed your silence was surrender. You were sharpening the blade. And now, they have the nerve to ask what happened. As if it wasn't them who taught you to stop explaining. They waited for a post, a speech, a breakdown. They got none of it. Because you finally understood something sacred, you are not required to prove your evolution to those who enjoyed your decay. That revelation turned you into a mirror. Now, when they see you, they don't see growth. They see the reflection of everything they refuse to become. Your reinvention is a judgment, whether you intend it or not. and that judgment slices clean. You don't need to say a word. Your presence holds court. Their discomfort is your announcement. Their confusion is your advertisement. Their silence, that's applause in disguise. There's psychology behind this. The ego resists change in others because it highlights stagnation in the self. When you evolved, you violated their emotional contract. You broke the illusion that everyone was still on the same level. They feel abandoned not because you left, but because you rose. And now they're faced with a decision: adapt or resent. Most choose resentment. It's easier. It allows them to stay the same. But you didn't ask for their vote. You changed anyway. And now their resentment is the soundtrack to your ascension. They want to drag you back into debates, into emotional traps, into explanations. Don't bite. Reinvention doesn't look back. You already burned the script. The old you was fluent in justification. The new you speaks in boundaries. You walk into a room and they feel it before you say a word. That's the new language. They ask questions, but it's not curiosity. It's control in disguise. Don't teach them. Don't translate. Let them guess. Let them misunderstand. That's how you keep your power. Evolution is not for comprehension. It's for creation. And creators owe no one clarity. Here's what they'll never admitting: they felt safest when you were predictable. When your identity stayed small, digestible, tethered to their memory. You played your part well. Too well. But you eventually realized that the mask wasn't armor. It was a leash. And when you ripped it off, when you started moving with no need for applause, their equilibrium collapsed. Your detachment was their unraveling. Because people like that don't actually fear failure. They fear witnessing someone else escape it. You became that escape, and now your silence is more dangerous than their attacks ever were. So let them call it a phase. Let them say you've changed. Let them wonder if this is the real. You are a performance. You owe them no clarity, because the truth is, you didn't become someone new. You remembered who you were before the world convinced you to forget. That memory isn't up for debate. It's not a group project. You moved without instruction, healed without applause, rebuilt without a blueprint. And that, above all else, makes you untouchable. Reinvention doesn't need validation. It refuses it.